Write checks every month for technology. Am I already not paying someone to worry about this? In the last video, I covered what is ADA compliance and who it applies to. If you missed that video, you can go ahead, I'll put a card up here, you can go ahead and have a watch on that video. And today, what I wanted to talk about is a question that my client had, who unfortunately is being sued. He's being sued in federal court for ADA non-compliance. That's how he became a client. But a question he had, which is, I write checks every month for technology. Am I already not paying someone to worry about this? Fair question. All right, let's get into that. Okay, so if you are like many businesses out there, your technology is probably outsourced. Either all of it or most of it is probably outsourced to vendors such as managed services providers, managed security services providers, website development companies, application support companies. It's probably outsourced. That is a trend that started many years ago. It's very good from an economic standpoint because you only pay for what you use. But a lot of times it means that you might not have the positions in-house that would typically deal with this. So as I mentioned, my client, he said, am I not paying someone already to worry about this for me? And in his case, the answer was no. So you can look and see, is ADA compliance for your website specifically covered in any of your contracts with your existing vendors? So if you were to look to your existing contracts with your existing vendors, here are some things that you will want to look for. This is a typical solutions menu from a marketing company or a web design company, something similar to what you might have today. We're just going to take a closer look at their design and build services. This is what you're looking for here, an ADA web accessibility package. They might have a pre-canned package that you can purchase that includes a number of things that will get you at least closer to having a fully accessible site or an a la carte pricing. But if this is something that your vendor offers, just verify that you have purchased it. Here are some components that you would find typically included in a package like that. Improved keyboard navigation and screen reader capability. This is to allow visually impaired folks to use more keyboard navigation as well as a screen reader so that they can have the content read to them by their device. Also, color scheme contrast corrections and improvements. So if you have text overlaying graphics, for instance, you want to make sure the contrast is high enough as well as the image itself has a high enough contrast and resolution to be viewed correctly by someone with a visual impairment. Additional ARIA attributes to elements and tags. This is something that a reader would typically care about more. By that I mean a screen reader. It allows a screen reader to give more information to the user, as well as alternative attributes within images. Because somebody who's using a screen reader won't actually see your image, this is the description that you give, the alternative description or alternative attribute that you give to the image so they know what the image is meant to represent. Adding label tags to email forms. This helps someone who is visually impaired complete a form because they can't see all the fields the same as it would appear to someone without a visual impairment. Modifying your CAPTCHA codes within email forms. This is that code that you have to enter to prove to the computer that you're not a computer, right? And so this allows it to be an auditory code, which is super helpful to people who are using screen readers and to people with visual impairments. Also, skip to content features that allow them to skip to the next content section on your web page, because if we remove all the graphics from a web page, that is how a lot of visually impaired people will actually use your site. Improving your font legibility so that if the user views the font at a much larger size than what you originally designed or intended it to be, it will still fit within the context of everything around it. Also removing any open in new window code, which is super common and it is on almost every single site, unless that open in a new window has been put into the correct context so it doesn't disorientate the users. Those are the types of features and elements that you would typically see in a web accessibility package, or can be adjusted a la carte based on the needs of your site and what needs to change. And you'll be able to see if that is included in any of your existing contracts. I'm going to say the majority of the time the answer is no. That's what we found. We work with lots of clients in this space, and that's what we have found is generally it's something that is not covered. There's two places that if it were covered is probably where you will find it. One is with your managed service provider if they also manage your website for you. And sometimes you can get an all-in-one deal where your managed service provider actually does your website development, but generally those are two different vendors. So if your managed services provider manages your website for you, meaning they handle patching, they handle any kind of security updates that have to happen to it, and any sort of changes go through them, then yes, they may handle it for you. Generally, managed services providers typically provide DNS management only. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. If your website works, chances are they're doing it for you. If you're a managed service provider and you do provide this service, pop a comment below because there's probably a lot of people that might be interested in finding out more about your services. The other vendor who might handle this for you is your web developer or your web development company or agency, if that's what you use. So in a lot of cases, the trend has been to move away from big all-in-one agencies to smaller development companies, which makes complete sense because a website creation, website maintenance, even website hosting a lot of times can get very pricey. So there's definitely a move towards that. But it's also possible that what they do is they build it for you, you sign off on it, you say, yes, it's done, and they say, okay, great, we'll maintain it for you going forward. If they, for instance, might be making sure your website doesn't get hacked. They might be making sure that you don't get malware on your website, those sorts of things. But then any kind of changes are typically on a time and materials basis, right? So in that case, in the majority of website providers that we have found, they don't cover that within their contract. They're happy to sell it to you, right, in terms of making those changes to you, but it's not part of your existing contract. So not that we're looking for somebody to blame, because blame doesn't help once the lawsuit is filed, but not that we're looking for somebody to blame. But if you are looking to one of those vendors, check carefully your contracts because it's very possible it's not within anyone's scope of work. Typically, this service is provided by a third party who specifically handles compliance. Now, either of these vendors might be able to give you recommendations. I know our teams work with a lot of managed services providers, and so a lot of times we'll be their companion in this piece. So ask them for recommendations for sure, but it's very possible that unfortunately, ADA compliance is not covered in something you're already paying for. This video is part of an ongoing series to demystify ADA compliance. So if you would like to see the next video in this series, go ahead and click subscribe to be notified as soon as it's released. And you might also want to check out these videos popping up around you here. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.